After the convergence, which was just a title given by humans where they got a bit of a upgrade, when an interstellar object passed in front of Earth and decided to basically explode, bursting a form of cosmic radiation right across the planet's face, which turned out to be a surprisingly jarring experience. So much so that many either didn't survive or didn't want to, as suddenly their intelligence level jumped, their physical level jumped, and for some, it was just too much. It wasn't as though they were brought themselves to a point where they were better than they were, only as good as they could possibly be, and for some, that just wasn't enough. Those that survived, approximately 50% of the overall population, began to truly reach for the stars at that point, realizing that if they kept going the way they're going, they need to get off this rock. Yet once large portions begin to reach out into the stars and make contact with the other spacefaring species, they quickly discovered that the majority of work that needed to be done was in simple logistics. Trade goods became extremely profitable. From small ships that were barely the size of a 3-bedroom house to massive ships where you could park the entire island of Manhattan inside, they were all loaded with shipping crates all over the place. The shipping crates came standard sizes, of course, basically small, medium, large, and holy crap. However, it didn't matter. If it fit inside the crates, it shipped. For a price, of course. Humans always had a price on them, but the human ships were always on time, which meant that every time a human ship arrived, they were immediately contracted, if they weren't already contracted. There were very few exceptions to this. One of them, well, comes down to the fact that piracy still does exist, which means that if they were actually taken over by pirates, the chances are that the human ship is drifting in space and they're going to die very, very slowly. Or the ship itself has already been destroyed by something, not just pirates, but a rogue asteroid. Maybe you got caught up a gravity well that wasn't there before. Whatever it might be, as long as that human is still breathing with a working ship, they will be on time. And very quickly, humans learn that they're going to have to take pirates down themselves, and they do very, very well, which is another reason why it's very expensive to contract a human. On one of these cargo ships called Tripping the Rift, the captain, along with his AI drones, are packing up a shipment. This was pretty normal, but one thing was a bit odd. It was that some of the station personnel wanted to actually place some crates personally on the ship. When denied, they insisted that they need to be the ones to secure them. They were told by the captain, "No one boards my ship unless I say so." When those that wanted to board the ship got beyond insistent, getting to the point of physical, automated weapons began to deploy, and the captain simply looked at them and said, "Better choose well." Yet even if they decided to use the captain as a shield, it wouldn't have helped because everyone knows humans are always packing. As they were loading up the rest of the crates, a few Montonians actually came and asked for transport. They must have seen the manifest, and they knew that the captain and the Tripping the Rift would be flying right past their homeworld. The captain looks down on them. They're all 3 of them fairly young females, all 3 in tattered clothing, all 3 with fresh wounds, and the telltale markings across the neck, the wrists, the ankles that showed of chains. He paused for only a moment before hitting the comms and saying, "Pamela, make some room. We're going to have some company." As he turns and he moves them inside, alarms begin to blare. They found a tracking device on one of the Montonians. Her light green humanoid form just stopped dead, not knowing what was going on. But when she told that she had a tracking device on her, she began looking all over herself. and she couldn't figure out where it was. They checked the rags that she was wearing, but they couldn't find anything. But running a scanner over, they found her. Apparently, it had been inserted into her left ass cheek. With a small incision by a simple blade, they took it out, tossed it onto the deck, and they were brought in. An android drone of Pamela actually removed the clothing from all the females at that point, not wanting to risk anything else getting in, and simply tossed them onto the bay, not even caring, many times just tearing at the fabric, ripping it off, even though the females were now scared, embarrassed, cold without any coverings, and then simply moved on inside as everybody in the bay simply looked, trying to get an eye full, or multiple eyes, or a compound eye full. After that, the captain went to finish up, making sure that the manifest was complete. As he stood there, double-checking everything, he felt a small tug on the side of his pants. "What the hell is that? Someone pulling my leg?" he said to himself. But he looked down and he saw a young boy, an Anzil. That was strange. What is an Anzil doing here? He asked the boy what was going on, but the boy didn't talk. But the look in his eyes was that of desperation. He pointed over to the side, and of course the captain looked over, but he could barely see what was going on. He walked over, making sure that he left security, of course. But as he turned the corner, he saw the legs, the small green legs sticking out. He moved and looked closer, and he saw a female Anzil off to the side. The captain checked her out and tried to get her to talk, tried to talk to the kid as well. Then he remembered Anzils don't start speaking until about the human age of about 5 or 6, but the eyes say everything. The captain pulls out his device and checks the vitals of this female Anzil, and they are not good. Not good at all. He calls for 2 more of Pamela drones, and they rush over to him, and they take her inside, and the other drone actually picks up the small boy and rushes him inside as well. The small side quest after delivering isn't going to hurt, just going over to the Anzil homeworld. It's only going to be 1 jump off, which isn't going to cost anything, really. Besides, he can always do something nice for a change. Now that they're loaded, they seal up and they begin leaving. As they get underway, they leave the gravity well of the station and jump to FTL. The journey till their final destination, their final port of call, will take about 11 human days. Now they're clear of that sector, and they know that no one's actually going to try anything stupid. He goes down to medical to see how his new passengers are handling things. The Montonians are very chatty. They sit there and talk about the ship. They get a look at its schematics, and they talk about how it's a flying crate and how it's strange. How could this thing even move? Thinking about how Montonian ships are very, very narrow and sleek, as though they're trying to pierce through space itself. Yet, all the captain could say is, look, she is a crate, but she's a crate with great food. Once you're clear here, I expect you to go eat. As some drones assure that the Montonians are cared for and make sure that once they're done in medical, they're going to head down to the galley, the captain and a few other drones move to the other side of the infirmary. That's where they see the Anzil mother? He wasn't sure. All he knew is it's a female, and currently floating in one of his medical pods. Usually a medical pod isn't used except for dire circumstances, but this was emergency procedures just to keep her alive. He tried to tell the young boy to do something. Obviously he could understand the speech, but he still couldn't talk. But the boy refused to leave. Understandable. He didn't know if this boy was watching over his mother or what. Maybe it was his older sister. Nobody knew, but this kid was not moving, and if you tried, he's going to fight tooth and nail. So he just made sure that drones came, brought him food, got him water, brought him some new clothing, but before he could put the clothing on, He was actually surprised as multiple drones actually showed up and began to give him a sponge bath. At first, he screamed and yelled. He thought it was going to be acid or something, maybe. But as soon as the warm water touched his skin, and then, of course, getting toweled off by 3 very decent-looking humanoid androids, the boy calmed down. But he still wouldn't leave the infirmary. He just stood there and stared. As the captain was in the middle of reviewing the medical reports of his new companions, he hears the voice of the AI come across the speakers, not from the androids in the room, even though they all seem to stop at the same time. And the same noise comes out of them, the voice saying, "Captain, to Cargo Bay 3, immediately. I say again, Captain, to Cargo Bay 3, immediately." He immediately rushes towards the bay, as this is a potential threat discovered. This makes him nervous. He's in FTL. If something goes bad at FTL, there's not going to be enough left of them to actually bury in a secrets box. The captain, as he runs down the hall, says, "Activate security and meet me in Cargo Bay 3. Inside the bay, he gets there as the security androids are already lined up. In that moment, he thinks to himself the same thing he always does when he sees the security androids. Nothing like a fine, naked woman holding a gun. And that gun's all sorts of fine now, isn't it? He keeps the thought to himself, even though he chuckles for just a moment before he moves on to the crate. All the security androids are staring towards the crate, and the crate itself is making noise. This isn't good. Something's wrong. You don't travel with live biologicals in a crate. That's not how things are done. And if it is biological, if it is alive, like say even a plant or something, you need to know. They need to tell you this. He double checks the manifest and nothing. This should be nothing but some extra materials for building. It was odd. The captain moves very carefully. He moves towards the crate, puts his hand on it, and feels it move again just a little bit, as though something inside was trying to get out. As he reached to open the crate, every single one of the androids was now ready, poised, safety's off. And then he opens it. As the door drops, 6 hardly adolescent fun dips actually fell down, dropping out almost on top of each other. All of them naked, covered in filth, and all scared to death at this point as they look up and realize that a half a dozen very strong weapons are pointed directly at them. This is when the captain just starts cursing as loud as he can because he hates this. He knows that fun dips are the most sought-after slave species strictly because of their shimmering beauty. Quite literally, they shine. If fed even decently, whenever they feel any emotion, they seem to shimmer. Their bioluminescence is actually how they communicate. Even if they're depressed, they give off a certain color, a certain hue, which again, sometimes people buy them just for decoration, or they use them in other ways. After calming himself down, the captain turns to the security and simply says, "Stand down." As he walks to them, the fun dips are actually scared to death. In one case, one of them once again defecates themselves because they're so scared. They don't know what this giant whatever it is coming towards them. They obviously had never seen a human before. But the captain gets down on one knee, looks them in the eye, and he sees that they're all petrified. And even after he puts the rifle he had across his back, slinging it, he simply says, "Looks like we have some more passengers," before reaching out and simply holding his hand out, waiting for them to take it. One of them, obviously the oldest one, reaches out and takes his hand, at first simply grabbing a finger, and then reaching with both hands and grabbing his hand, and the others begin to follow, grasping on and pulling close. And that's when he stands up just a little bit and leads them away with the drones, 2 of them in tow. 6 others are now staying behind because, as the captain gave the order, "I want to know how these kids got smuggled onto my ship." The kids themselves were treated like the rest, immediately brought to the medical, cleaned up afterwards, given new clothing, and brought over to get some food in them, a little bit at a time so they didn't have a bad reaction, then given some sort of quarters. The Flindips themselves never want to be separated from each other, which is normal for their species. They do not like being separated unless they're with their mate, which is, well, let's just say these ones are far too young for that. By the time he gets them all fed and put to bed, the report is ready. The captain reads how the cargo crate was designed specifically to fool his bioscanners. Seeing this, looking over the way it was designed, he got more and more pissed. Yet he calmed himself as he knows getting angry is not going to do anything. He still highlights what they had done, and he says to the drones, "Now that we know what to look for, scan every container. I don't care how large or how small, I want every single container scanned and find out if there's any more on this ship." They leave, of course. And after finding 2 more crates that had been set up the same way, they opened them. One only had living creatures, a single adult Flindip on it. The other one had 3 what seemed to look like teenagers in it. However, whoever sealed it too well. They had all died of asphyxiation long before they even got onto the ship. With sensors adjusted and recalculated, new sensors also had to be made to get through this jamming field, these extra layers, to make sure that they would not be able to do this again. The crates that were used to smuggle these Flindips were moved to a separate area, and the investigation continues. The passengers recover on the ship. This included the female Enzel, who was actually out of the infirmary in 2 days, as the medical pod basically performs a magic trick. All are told to stay hidden on their next protocol, but they need to fix themselves first, but they don't want to be seen. At first, they had no idea why. That is until Pamela, in one of her drone forms, said, "This is how humans settle things. You do not want to be seen. Trust me." With the fact that they had now been not only fixed up, but given good food, clothing, and a soft place to sleep, they did trust Pamela. Hell, they trusted her more than they trusted the captain, as he was usually off trying to figure out how to deal with this. When they reached the next station, this one far larger than the one he had just left, all the 3 crates were offloaded. He made sure he knew which ones they were. The captain, thankfully, can hide his grin underneath his helmet as he's wearing his exosuit, and realize that he's leaving them with a bit of a gift. As he leaves the station, he sees the first of 3 blowouts in the station. As the Tripping the Rift has already cleared its moorings and trying to just go through port speed to get far enough to activate FTL, all the calls go over the radio and the sensors and everything else as they're like, "What the hell just happened in the station?" All the captain says, "Oh, I don't know. I wonder what could have happened." He thinks about what he had done, set up each of these crates to detonate the moment they were unsealed. He left the bodies, at least one of each of those that had asphyxiated, inside. Their actual blood, their DNA, and everything would be found as evidence, would also show that they had been smuggling. And smuggling and slavery is still a high crime in this sector, which is why they had used crates. On the way to the closest system to drop off the passengers, the Montonians, along with the newly fixed Enzel female, confronted the captain to compensate him for the travel and, of course, for the supplies. This was something he wasn't expecting, as all he was doing was his standard walk around, and he was about to head to the gym, actually, for his workout, and yet they all seemed to stop him just as he was leaving his own quarters. They all said that they wanted to compensate him for the travel, supplies, and everything else, and the captain at first didn't know what to say, But then he thought for just a moment and said, I will not ever demand compensation. And I understand what compensation you're talking about. Yet I am not so prideful as to refuse what is offered. Needless to say, this made the rest of their trip almost as explosive as the crates. After dropping off the Montonian females, each with a bag of supplies and, of course, an energy pistol, which he had actually instructed them on how to use, he moved on to the next drop point. The next was the Anzel, woman and her, as it turns out, nephew, with the same set of supplies. It was not surprising that as soon as they got there, she had made a call before they even touched down onto the planet, and her own family was there to greet them, all with hugs and everything. Both the female and the boy had the bags over their backs, which seemed to surprise their family, as what are they doing carrying human supplies? Yet they wouldn't find a pistol in the young boy's bag. He's a bit too young for it. The group of Flendips actually had to be dropped off as well. However, this had to be done a little sneaky. There need to be a communication, and yet they could always be found out if they were sending communication straight to the Flendip home system. Instead, the captain had to send over a message to a buddy who sent the message over to the human governments over the Flendip government so that they could actually send a military vessel to go meet them. This can be touchy, as the Flendips know that they are highly prized, so they get even more paranoid than humans about the whole thing. As they came out of FTL, the Tripping the Rift was almost nose to nose with a Flendip frigate that was meant to see them. With that, they immediately communicated between each other and docked next to each other so that the military folks could secure their kin. The captain still insisted on giving them supplies and weapons just in case, he said, and gave the military all the evidence he had as well. When he handed over the data packet, that's when all of them realized that he was not being the asshole. He was trying to do the right thing. They realized by the evidence they had, plus mixing it with the evidence from the space station that currently had 3 very large holes in it, they knew exactly who was the one trading in their kin. And they had a big human grin on their face, realizing they know exactly who to go after now. After departing his friends, the captain was on the bridge, not traveling anywhere. He just watched as the frigate jumped away, realizing that he had done some very nice things. And then before he left, he had to look over for potential shipping contracts as well. As his ship, the Tripping the Rift, just sat there in space as he was going over the HoloNet, Pamela's most attractive android drone body walks in without a single stitch of clothing on. As she walks up behind him, she speaks saying, "Just another adventure for us logistics folks." At that point, she comes around the side, climbs into his lap, and looks at the HoloNet panel before saying, "Right, Captain Scarborough?" With that, he pushes the HoloNet screen away, looks her right in the eyes, his hands begin to wander, and he says, "You bet that sweet ass of yours. Makes me wonder what else we'll find inside the crates." Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this quick one-off story, which hopefully made you chuckle a little bit. Now before I go, I need to send out some gigantic thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac and Pancakes, SS Demon, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Brian Kemp, Guardian Sage, and Julius Boone. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.